Yeah, I'm happy to see so many people joining in, and yeah, wherever you are currently across the globe. So being it like morning, afternoon, evening, from wherever you're chiming in currently. And I'm more than delighted to have this opportunity to share some insights with you. I'm currently sitting in Bled in Slovenia. And we have quite some extraordinary days of snow, and I hope so. It's really snowing quite heavily, so I hope that the internet connection will stay strong. So bear with me. And yeah, I'm more than delighted to get going. If you have any questions in the meantime, pop them into the chat maybe, because I'm operating on a very small screen, so I might need the help of Abby to give me a quick hint and opening her mic whenever there are any questions that I'm not seeing while I'm talking the whole time. I try to end my presentation a little earlier so we have enough chance to interact, ask questions, discuss. Yeah, but I would like to introduce, first of all, what I did. And then, of course, would be super happy, super thrilled to get your insights, your feedback. Maybe you've had the chance to try something similar in your institutions. So yeah, I will just share my screen now with you. And then I think we can probably already get going. Let me just quickly move to the full screen so that I can see all of the slide details. So yeah, as I said before, I'm Marina. I'm now currently working at IEDC-Bled's Growth Management, as this is obviously a event hosted in a series of the Sustainability Centers community. We also do have a institute that is associated to IEDC, which is the World Institute for Sustainability and Ethics. It's still fairly young, so we are growing and, like working on our idea, but yeah, we are still very much hopeful that this is a right, field to continue fostering. And I believe that we have many on this call today that have similar aspirations and similar activities going on. Yeah, before that, I have been spending most of my time in the German academic sector or in German academic institutions. So for some of you familiar to German names, my last name doesn't sound particularly Slovenian because it's German. So I am German, and that is probably why some of you might be confused at first. But yeah, Germans are, as I learned from all of my colleagues, found to be everywhere, so this is probably not an exception. But I'm super thrilled to talk about the topic of exploring the intersection between future studies and sustainable management today. And I have brought with me, and please also, if you have any questions also after the presentation and you cannot stay on, reach out via email, connect with me over like LinkedIn, and we can still, set up a different date to talk this through further. So what is the goal for me today is to talk about future studies and futures literacy as, let's say, the anchor point from where I started to bring in the perspective of sustainable management that I have been exposed to predominantly. So I'm not a future studies or futures literacy expert, just to make this very clear in the first place. So that has been my my humble attempt to really dive into this field, explore where are some possible potential synergies that I can make use of. And what I'm showing to you today is actually the outcome of this exploration. So first of all, maybe to get us started, and Abby, here where I would already need your help to see how many responses come up in the chat. Just maybe add a number one to the chat if you are positive with the response to this question. So who of you has prior experience with anything related to the academic field of futures studies? So anyone who has heard about the topic, has been, publishing on this, maybe even, or exploring this, maybe just drop number one in the chat. I would be excited to see this. And maybe Abby, you can help me.
We're at 5, 6 so far.
Okay, cool. That sounds perfect. So we have a number of experts already. And then the second question, who has heard about the term futures literacy? So if you have heard about the term, pop a 2 into the chat, please. So have you heard about the term futures literacy? Okay, I can see a couple of more notifications popping up. So yeah, it seems to be definitely, yeah. Thank you, Abby. And the last question, who has participated in a futures literacy laboratory before? Just pop a 3 into the chat. So the numbers are not going up that quickly, Abby, if I'm seeing that right.
Yeah, we've got 2 people with 3. So. Oh, and Julia says she did one with you, Julia Waldiger.
Ah, yeah, that's true. I'm thrilled to also see you being part of this talk today. So thanks for stopping by. Yeah, and that is also what I'm further exploring. So why do I particularly believe that for sustainability or educators in the field of sustainability, future studies is interesting to explore? Because I do believe, and please also, share your, dissatisfaction with this statement if you have another opinion on that. But I really strongly do believe that there is a very important connection between future studies and sustainability. And when I was diving and making my first attempts to understand really what is the field about and what are, some cornerstones, some, assumptions of the field, I was like, that could be very interesting, because I do believe that there are some overlaps in certain assumptions that the field of sustainability and future studies hold. So first of all, what I discovered myself is one of the aims of so-called using the future is discovering together new and relevant content about certain futures of specific topics. So you can have a futures literacy laboratory, for example, about the future of management, the futures of mobility, the futures of cities, and any kind of topic you can potentially imagine. Then, of course, one further aim is experimenting with different futures and also strengthening your own imagination. And I think that is quite vital also for students nowadays, because when I engage with them in talks about sustainability, they get quite rapidly also in the stage of, I don't want to call it depression, but they're very anxious about the future. And they don't see, a way out of the multiple crises we are facing currently. The third aspect is, and that also comes from a particularly, discipline and strand within future studies, is to push the term futures literacy. So how can you actually be competent in a way how to deal with different topics arising from the domain of future studies, and how can you use that and foster this into a so-called anticipatory competence? The main drivers behind this agenda of futures literacy is the UNESCO and affiliated chairs and researchers. And you can see some of the publications, or one of the publications actually on this slide. It's the, from a, let's say, European standpoint, I would compare it to the Bible, so to speak, of future studies. It's called Transforming the Future, Anticipation in the 21st Century. It's actually an open access book. But there are many other publications you can obviously consult, but this is the go-to book if you want to explore further future studies, particularly also futures literacy, and want to dive more into the topic. Then there are other books that are maybe less technical, so to speak. For example, one of my colleagues, Stefan Bergheim, who was publishing a book for, let's say, low entry barriers, not so technical, not so, methodology driven, just introducing people who have never heard about future studies to some potential benefits, and that is called Futures Open to Variety. Then there are also some books out there in the popular press, for example, Utopia for Realists. Maybe some of you have even read the book. I can definitely recommend it. It's quite interesting and sparks new ideas, I believe. And these are the ideas behind strengthening futures literacy, drawing also on a larger set of methods for different purposes. So this futures literacy laboratory that I have already mentioned in my third question just before is one of the potential methods you could use. And then, of course, being more at ease when dealing with complexity and uncertainty. I believe that is very important when engaging in this topic with students. And that is why I also came to really love engaging with future studies, because I believe that students really need this competence to deal with complexity and uncertainty these days. And then the last point, understanding that also the future is open to variety and that we still have the power to shape it, and that it's not something predetermined. And so that is also why when I usually talk about the future, future studies use it intentionally in the plural form. So whenever somebody talks about futures with an S at the end, you can be pretty sure that they have been exposed to some ideas from the future studies field. So there is a methodological, or let's say terminology difference between these sort of assumptions that are behind that. Now, because I have already mentioned the Futures Literacy Laboratory to you, I want to just give you a brief intro about this term for those of you who have not yet come across it. So the Futures Literacy Laboratory is a tool that can be used, let's say in different phases. Usually you have to run through all of the phases at once. The Futures Literacy Laboratory, or in one run, let's put it that way, not at once, but in one run. And usually they take between like 4 to 6 hours, some even longer. You can prolong them as long as you want. You can even have several workshops in a row. You can have a probably Futures Literacy Lab that will run an entire week. That is up to you, but just cutting it short is a little bit difficult. So fitting all the phases into like 3-4 hours is quite intense. So I wouldn't recommend it. So if you have more time, I think that is more adequate. But I also try to, have these different phases spread out, or using tools of each of the phases across an entire course. So this is still up to you from a methodological standpoint. Now, what are the different phases about? So the first phase is reveal. What is reveal about? It's about thinking or exposing us, sharing probable and desirable futures. So first of all, the group shares about their probable futures that they believe are realistic to a certain extent, that they believe could come through, and they would bet their money on that these futures would materialize. Second one is desirable. Each of us, we have all different ideas about what we think is a desirable future. Then in the second phase, it's the reframe. We would intentionally, as educators, take the respective futures and model or come up with a different future that is totally new, totally different from the futures revealed in phase 1, to just get students exposed to something new, something different. Phase 3 is about reflecting on what has happened in phase 1 and phase 2 and coming up with open new questions and consolidating what we've heard. Phase 4 is more about getting active, but again, in the field of future studies, people are also debating about how many phases actually we do have as part of a Futures Literacy Lab. Some say phase 1 to phase 3 is enough. We don't need phase 4. I do believe, maybe that is also my business school perspective, the last phase is for me very crucial, because I also want to give the students really the tools that they can actually implement their imaginations about particular futures. Again, this is up for debate, obviously. What are the collaboration rules of the Futures Literacy Lab? Obviously, sharing your own viewpoints and accepting that everyone has different ideas about certain futures, allowing everyone to have their say and to contribute. There is no right and wrong, so we all don't know what the future will look like, or specific futures, so there is no right and wrong, simply. Very important also, listen actively and really trying to understand each other's different viewpoints and try to understand where you're coming from, and also connecting ideas. So what is very important, and one of the goals of Futures Literacy Labs and future studies in general, is to try to understand where we are coming from and why we envision different futures. And that has to do a lot with what we call in the field anticipatory assumptions. So we do have different ideas about how different futures can shape, and that depends on maybe where you've grown up, your educational experience, maybe some languages you speak, the cultures you have been exposed to, family backgrounds, and so on and so forth, like many, many different things that you have experienced throughout your life. And because we're all different in what we experienced, we do have different exposure and different assumptions that we hold. And they can be, yeah, not necessarily right or wrong, but this is just different. And we have to talk about this in order to understand why we imagine so many different futures and where this is coming from. So yes, by exposing all of this anticipatory assumptions, we are making ourselves also very vulnerable in the process. So revealing that and explaining why you think maybe a sustainable world will not materialize is something very personal at the end of the day. And so discussing that, exposing yourself with these viewpoints can have, of course, certain or can pose certain threats. So it's very important that you create a safe space when these assumptions are being shared. This is as far as, very, very, very brief intro to future studies, futures literacy ideas is concerned, or the future labs. Now I want to share with you how I use this particular ideas from the field, from the concepts, and implemented it into a course design. So in short, what did I do? I conceptualized a course that was aimed for the group size of 15 to 20 master students. The course duration was 7 weeks, so 2 times 90 minutes in a block format per week. And also a learning environment that was hybrid. So my idea was to combine the discipline and ideas, methodologies of the field of future studies and apply it to the field where I teach, and that is sustainable management. And so when I was first exposed to future studies, futures, all of these concepts, I came across first the concept of the so-called Zukunftswerkstatt. It's called in German, it's future workshop, if I would translate it. It's a concept, shared in like 1997. Coincidentally, it also is comprised out of 4 phases, not to be confused with the Futures Literacy Lab, but it's still very similar. So it has a preparation phase, a critique phase, visioning phase, and also implementation phase. And students create and develop their own narrative and story by experiencing selected exercises. I have used methods from trends analysis, foresight, scenario planning. We have been doing backcasting exercises, prototyping. I had 2 additional workshops as part of this course. One was on improv theater and the other one was a Lego serious play session. And so the task for the students was to engage in or pick a particular business sector. So we had like sectors like mobility or topics like mobility. We had tourism, we had fashion, we had food, and then students were asked to come up with their own vision of that particular concept of that particular sector. And so I don't want to go too much into the learning objectives really, but it was again also conceptualized along the cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral dimensions, again from the UNESCO framework. And there were certain competencies that I thought would align with some of the goals that I had. You will get the slides later, so you can read through that. I don't want to bore you with the learning objectives. I think we're here more to learn about how I engaged really the students. And so this is how the course was conceptualized. So the name is Future Scenarios for Sustainable Business Solutions. And in week 1, there was more of a formal intro. I did some team building or team formation more. So the students were working in these like sector teams throughout the whole course. And of course, some administrative details, some introduction to future studies and futures into some of the grand challenges in week 2. So criticizing also the status quo that we find ourselves in, talking about wicked problems, talking about certain megatrends, about systems thinking, SDGs, systems mapping as an idea and different utopias. Week 3 and 4 were more on the visioning and fostering imagination logic. So exploring and expressing utopia through creative means. So we had this like improv theater workshop with a trainer. We were exploring utopias and futures research. We did develop some scenarios. We did some gamification or gamified exercises. I can also share more material later on. And in week 5, 6, we had the implementation phase. So we were going more into backcasting exercises, prototyping. We did some Lego series play as prototyping methodology. And then week 7 was debriefing and the final presentations of the students. Now, what is the impact I believe I made, or what was I particularly interested in fostering? I was interested in conceptualizing a course that would be high on student collaboration and group work, high on participation and activeness and engagement, involvement of students, high on a degree of self-reflection, and I was particularly interested in overcoming the divide between theory and practice. Now, what was the assessment form? The course assessment was divided into a media output that was 70% again a group grade because students were working in groups the whole time. Media output can be, or in this case was, so most of the students actually went for the podcast. Only one group went for the video, which was actually excellent. I wish we had the time to show this to you, but maybe later on I can find a way to share this with you nevertheless, but it was really amazing. And then I also gave them the option to come up with different blog posts on the respective future on the sector. But most students were actually going for the podcast. One group went for the video, and we didn't have any students interested in writing blog articles. And so in addition to this like group grade, I was also giving them the homework of writing a reflective journal of what they experienced each week. So each of the 7 sessions we had together. And during these different phases or during the different sessions, like after each session, I had like some reflective questions that I gave them for homework, and then they were able to answer that in the reflective journal. The reflective journal I didn't grade on, you know, like how well it was written or whatever, more on the process that I thought the students made through progressing through the course and how much of the input they were given from my side and how much input they were actually taking out of the exercises into the reflective journal was more something that counted for me. And yeah, so I asked them to write 1 to 2 pages after each session, so around about 3,000 words or maybe a little bit more. Now, the most important part, obviously, for today is how to foster engagement, because that is what it's all about, at least today. So I assembled a number of active learning, experiential learning exercises, and collaborative learning. I also had obviously some brief lecture-based learning elements inside of the course when I introduced exercises or was talking about the current status quo of sustainable management or some of the grand challenges that we have, some input on the SDGs. These, like the first and second session, were probably a little bit heavier on the lecturing input than the other ones, but still I tried to keep it to a maximum of 15 minutes for the lecture input, and then we had like more exercises. Again, 2 workshops, I mentioned it before, one Lego series play and the other one on improv theater, where students were also physically engaging, which I found pretty important. So the setup was, as I said at the beginning, a hybrid one. I really wanted the students to visualize, nevertheless jointly, what they were doing collaboratively as a group. So I used a Miro board that I duplicated on one joint screen in the classroom, so they could actually see that all of them, whether they were participating in the classroom or at home, they could see all their little, you know, like cursors and names hopping around on the Miro board. So that was very important for me to see. And they were, of course, calling each other then in the classroom. So they had brought their own laptops with them. So still the group work, I was able to to connect them in their group for the exercises. Now, of course, the future workshop was enabling then more group discussion, vision building. I will tell you more just in a couple of seconds. And then again, the individual self-reflection was, of course, more fostered through tasks specifically given out in the journaling exercises. Now coming to the specific engagement elements, and there are a lot more that I can share with you in the additional material that I have accumulated. It's probably 10 pages or more of detailed exercises that I came up with and that I adopted also from other existing ones. So the first one, or one of the ones that we used in the early stages of this course, was exploring megatrends. Some of you might be familiar with this megatrends map here, and this exercise can be actually used during the critique phase, where the main goal of the exercise is also to familiarize oneself with current trends and risks and to apply them to a respective business sector. So I brought these maps. So we had an online version, of course, also for the students, but I also brought physical, printed like poster size maps to the students that were in class. And so I let them decide which of the avenues or which of the trends are most important for the sector that they are dealing with, being it like food, being it mobility, whatever sector they were picking. And then they should engage with this map and think about what are some of the mega trends that are most vital in terms of impact on their sectors. The second one, and this or one of the further exercises, was the systems mapping exercise. The interconnected circles. I really wanted them to understand the complexity of the issues they were dealing with. And so this draft in the middle is the connected circles and how I wanted them to draw the different circles. And so you see the different groups always work together in one frame. And then they were engaging about different issues. And then I wanted them to draw different errors in seeing or to see the connection that different ideas had that they were conceptualizing in the sectors. So this is just one of the exercises. I also did a systematic mapping with them about certain stakeholders that were relevant in their sectors. Again, there were more exercises that I did with them, but just a couple of them to expose this to you here more predominantly. The next one is the scenario development. So what I did here is asking students to, and that particularly happened through the visioning phase. So the main goal of the exercise was to develop 4 scenarios and discuss respective desirable or undesirable future. So on the right-hand side, so how the 4 scenarios work is you have like, of course, these like 2 axes. For example, for the group that was dealing with tourism, they said, oh, we want to explore some scenarios along the lines of being low or high on the social continuum, or being low or high on ecology, and what that would mean for the tourism sector. And then they came up with different scenarios, and the same also applied to the other groups. And then I asked them to come up with pictures that would stand kind of as a symbol for the different scenarios that they were envisioning. And then of course I had them engage in a discussion about they first of all presented their different scenarios, and then we engaged in a discussion about what they imagined and envisioned. The next one is the so-called futures wheel. This exercise can be also used during the implementation phase, for example, but also during other stages. And one of the ideas is to explore some what-if scenarios and also their consequences that match respective sectors. So this one, this group came up with the question, what if circular economy would be the norm? And then they came up with what would that mean? End of overproduction, better employment, maybe extended life cycle and products. What would it mean if we have an extended life cycle of products? Maybe we would rethink reusing, recycling. We would think differently about ownership topics. And so these were just the lines of thoughts I wanted to get students into, just thinking about potential avenues of futures. One exercise when it comes to backcasting, and again, just briefly explaining what backcasting is about. So the exercise can be used during the implementation phase to identify steps that need to be realized to achieve a certain future in the years to come. And so it helps you really plan very actively the actions that are necessary to also reach that desired future that you were thinking about. So I asked the students to list down a long-term goal, and then think about a time frame between 1 and 20 years. Usually for backcasting, it's a little bit longer of a time period. And then you need to work backwards to figure out the necessary action steps to achieve the long-term goal. And you really need to go step by step. So for example, if I say, I want to achieve sustainable mobility, whatever that might look like, I need to define it, obviously, in the year 2030 or 2040. What would be the next steps before that to achieve? Maybe I need to revise regulation. Maybe I need to rethink also operating models and so on. And then you make step by step, some progression in order to define what you need to be doing now to actually see the future that you envision materialize in 20 or 30 years from now. And then you use that as an action plan. What I didn't have the chance to do, but did in another workshop with my students, was envisioning or using the solar punk movement. For some of you that are not yet exposed or haven't been exposed to this term yet, is solar punk is a movement specifically also dealing with possible or desirable futures, let's put it that way, desirable futures of a certain group. And they envision particularly a very much sustainable future. And it's very much intertwined with storytelling. So if you want to get to know what's solar punk is about in more detail, I will definitely recommend the video that I linked down below here on the slide. You can also have a look at the certain blog posts that we do have here, I linked down also, or I linked here the solar punk storytelling website as well, where I did do the solar punk storytelling and theater play exercise with. And we selected a particular story that was called Where Giants Will Stand. How did we use the story? So we had a storyteller that was reading out the story to all of us. So it took like 10 minutes. So it was also a fully online session. And the first question they posited to all of us that were attending the session is what resonated in the story. And then they put us into different breakout rooms. So our task first was to find your own role in a possible common space inspired by the discussion we just had. So the story was, of course, introducing a lot of different characters. And then we were supposed to pick one of the characters, maybe the little girl that was part of the story, or the trees that were part in the whole storytelling, or the families, the grandparents that lived there. We could pick whatever actor we identified in the story. And then we were asked to take up this role. And we should, to also, internalize that change, we should change our Zoom name to exactly this role. So for example, I was changing my role to the old tree. And then we allowed ourselves to enter a series of dialogues between the new roles. So we're put into a breakout room with 5 other people, and you could then see what kind of roles they were taking. And then you speak from the position of the tree. So I was, of course, discussing about how I feel that the new generations are understanding more vividly my worth, and that I believe that I lost relevance with the older generations, and how unfair the past has been. And then you engage in a very true dialogue from a very different perspective. And then we also, and that was quite interesting, we came back, of course, doing a little bit debriefing what happened and writing that in the plenum chat. And then we also were then asked to rename to our true names once we came back, and then just debriefing and sharing what we felt, what we learned from playing this particular roles. And that was quite touching, I felt, from that particular perspective. And I was using these stories more in an IB, so international business contexts. But there you can also use other stories. So you can use also something from the field of science fiction. So whatever story resonates with you and picks or makes a good point of what you want to highlight in a specific session. It can be a science fiction story about AI, if you are interested in technology, for example, to bring this up with students. So there are like so many great short stories out there. And there are just a couple that I wanted to highlight here on the slide. So the solar punk storytelling one is really great, but they are again dedicated quite heavily to sustainability as a core focus. And then there's another story collection that just came out fairly recently. It's called No More Fairy Tales, Stories to Save Our Planet. They also have a compilation of short stories. So there are really a couple of great things out there that we educators can use. And the last aspect that I wanted to mention, and that is something that I did actually in the classroom, is the improv theater session. So I was doing that together with an external facilitator. I just have also introduced here a couple of pictures from some handbooks that you might or might not want to be using in the future. It's about some improvisation methods and some exercises that you can start with. And I wanted to really reintroduce fun to the classroom. Together with the groups, for example, you can use the following prompt. You need to improvise a story about a working day of a protagonist called Tony in an alternative future of, let's say, for example, management and organizations in the year 2035. And you ask that in each group, one person will start with a suggested sentence you can see down below, and then the next person will continue with the sentence or a few words even. And then you can go in turns and build the story together. And the goal is, of course, to be spontaneous and quick and just tell the first thing that comes really to your mind. And also not prepare, not writing anything down, and just enjoying the process. And so the prompt was, so you have to, or you can provide a setting if you want. So first of all, we thought about the setting in 2035. People have a great perceptiveness towards themselves, the environment and the global economy. The absence of money and competitiveness characterizes the economy itself. I believe that is probably very much familiar to one of our participants today in the session that did the Futures Lab with us and my colleagues. And then we had the prompt or the starting sentence, in the year 2035, Tony wakes up in the morning and starts a new working day. After fresh coffee, she checks the agenda for the current day. And then the first person has to start and continue the story and has to keep in mind this like prompt. So there is a world now that we find ourselves in that is characterized by no money and no competitiveness. So you can set whatever prompt you want. You can even do this exercise without any prompts or without any prompts in terms of backgrounds that you want to share. So there are so many improv exercises you could potentially explore. Or you can do the two-faced interview. You say, I want to get insights from a, let's say, a well-known researcher in the field of AI, for example, and then you ask the students to act as one researcher, and they should also then, follow up on each other's sentences. And then you have an interview that comes out of two people not really, knowing in advance what they will say to you as part of the interview. And that was a lot of fun with the students. There were a lot of, laughter in the classroom. It was truly enjoyable. And for the improv theater that I also used in the classroom myself, we had also some exercises where the students, or most of the exercises where the students actually were moving. So they weren't sitting behind their laptops, they were just exposed to walking, engaging with their bodies. And I think that is something we are truly missing most of the time in business schools, I feel. That is also why I want to end with some of the feedback that I received from my students, and they shared it in the start, stop, continue version with me, so of giving feedback. But I can start with the citations in the upper corner that you see. They said, it was great to have had the opportunity to move around in class during the improv workshop, not just sit on your chair and hide behind a laptop. And the second comment was, we wanted to say thank you for the great course. It was really very interesting, interactive, and a lot of fun. I've not been so attentive in a course for a long time, and especially the workshops were a highlight. Thank you very much. And so that was really, yeah, touching for me, because that was, again, I really didn't know. It was a pilot course for me. I didn't know what I was up against, or if students will be maybe hating it so much, even the improv, and were like, this is total nonsense, I don't want to do it, and it's horrible. But really, students liked it, and I was very, very happy for that. So what did the students say I could start with doing, or start considering doing? So some of them said they really loved like how many exercises I brought in, but then they were still feeling that sometimes less could be more. So giving them a little bit more time for the exercises, or having some reduction in the frequency, or let's say in the amount of exercises I was doing with them through class. They also were remarking that the Lego Series Play workshop could maybe, like that we had it after the critique phase or earlier, would have made more sense. I had it as a prototyping workshop towards the end. So you can use it for both purposes, but again, students gave me the feedback they would have preferred it a little bit earlier. They were mentioning that readings were fitting the overall scope of the course, but sometimes they were difficult to connect to individual sessions, because some readings were closer to what I discussed in class, some were building up on that. They were also criticizing that more questions about the readings for the reflective journal could be asked. So a couple of students were, of course, very diligent, read all of the readings, but then for the questions and the prompts for the reflective journal entries, I didn't particularly ask them, oh, I want you to reflect on XYZ reading. So some students were probably a little bit disappointed that I didn't do that. And also more details about the change models that I put in one of the sessions. What I should definitely continue doing is the workshops, the readings in general, keeping the reflective journal and the in-class exercises. They also really like this Miro board, that they could be together in one place, the surveys that I did in class, and engaging the class in general. They also were happy that they had more freedom to engage in an independent student work during the semester by following up on the podcast and the video. That was also creative coursework according to their assessment. It focused quite heavily on teamwork, and they liked that a lot. It was also mixing multiple methods, not only from sustainability backgrounds, but also mostly from future studies concepts. And they were able to choose an industry to work on. So I didn't particularly assign one sector to a particular group. And then they said I shouldn't be doing a Lego Series Play workshop anymore in an online format. Of course, that is not as, let's say, enjoyable as having that in class with a whole bunch of people together. But still, it was at that time the only option. Some students said they still liked it. Some others said, oh, I would have really, really preferred to have that in class. So how I did it was I had the facilitators also joining me online, and we did the building exercises online with everyone having their cameras on and then presenting their models in the camera and then explaining. And I sent all of the little pre-packed Lego parts to their home address. So this is how I prepared that. But again, it was more of a logistics struggle, and also it's of course not as fun and enjoyable because you're still sitting at home doing the building exercise, whereas it would have been maybe more inclusive and collaborative if you were with all of the other students together in the classroom. Yeah, then also continuing or closing my talk now with some announcements here. So we have the next speakers lined up with Sarah and Roman on February 16 on the topic of integrating sustainability across business bachelor programs. So I hope that all of you who joined today will sign up for their session as well, obviously. And then one announcement for the June 14 to 15, our Sustainability Center's community workshop. that will also take place during the Prime Global Forum and then in New York City. And that's it from my side. So I will just stop the screen sharing, and I hope I explained everything clearly and that you were able to follow. I know it's quite a bit to digest in terms of exercises, but there are many more I'm happy to share with you, so you can have my full slide decks. You can also maybe have a sneak peek at the Miro board and how I arrange things there and what exercises I put up there. But I think from the PDF and the Word documents, the exercises should hopefully be clear. And if you have, any further suggestions, questions, I'm happy to discuss that with those of you who are interested. Thank you so much. Any questions?
So wonderful, Marina. Thank you so much. One question that came up in the chat so far was just also about the student video that you mentioned, and if you might be able to see that as well after, if privacy allows. But just from NBS side, just wanted to say thank you for everything that you've shared. Maya and I were kind of chatting back and forth throughout of just what a complete model this has been to really show that dedication to being open and sharing all your experiences, including even the student feedback and the specific exercises, which have hit on so many of the different themes we've talked about, and even some of Divya's presentation last month with the reflective processes that we've learned to build empathy. I think, your course was really a model for so many of those things. So yes, please, anyone with questions, go ahead and jump in.
Thank you so much, Marina, for sharing. It's just mind-boggling, the amount of work that you've done here. It's super impressive. My question is, because it involves so many exercises, were there any sort of challenges in the implementation of those exercises you would like to reflect now? And thank you very much for everything here.
Thank you. With the implementation, I think as long as you don't overcomplicate the instructions, I tried to be very precise and very spot on. So I didn't produce or use any exercises where I thought they could be like too complicated or too complex to explain. What definitely was a challenge was the hybrid mode and the hybrid setting sometimes, because all of the exercises were done in group work. So I always had to make sure that all of the students working on mobility were also then having the chance to talk about the specific exercise in their context of mobility. So I had to always make sure, okay, who is today like in class, who is online, where do I have to, open a breakout room, and where do I have to make sure that they have the capacity to communicate also to the students in class. That was a little bit of a challenge, but I think because the class wasn't that large, so it was like just 15 students, it was doable. But if classes are larger, it will be more of a logistics challenge. So without anyone, by your side, like helping you a little bit with the logistics, I think it will be difficult. What I also found important is that students are exposed to some preliminary, let's say, knowledge about sustainability. So all of the students who signed up to my course, it wasn't a mandatory course, so they all signed up voluntarily, and they all were exposed previously to the sustainability already. And I think if you don't have the background of sustainability, you don't have maybe the ideas right away how, let's say, the future of food could look like, and what are maybe some trends, what are some ideas that that you come up with. And then I think the imagination is maybe lacking for some students who are not yet able to deal with these topics and are not yet as exposed to some of the trends, but then still, most of the exercises were, so I didn't have any exercise that was particularly difficult for the students to understand. I had just one where students were a little bit confused. It was a gamification exercise. It's called the Thing from the Future. And I really wanted to share this with students because I think it was a great exercise, but then sometimes I'm too ambitious and want to show students like everything. And then I completely mess up my time management. And again, like less is sometimes more. And it doesn't have to be like all the 4 exercises you actually wanted to show students. Maybe sometimes just focus on 2 and then more extensively does the trick. But yeah, so that was also why students were saying sometimes it was maybe a little bit too rushed, and then we only had like 20 minutes in this one exercise where we would have maybe enjoyed 30 minutes to really discuss everything through. And yeah, that was more the challenge, the time management, not really the instructions given. But every exercise that I used in the manual that I will also share with all of you later has a dedicated instruction also for the educators. Yeah, what are the instructions that you need to give out to students? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, Marina. My name is Anjali Chowdhury. My screensaver says Elizabeth Collier. She's my colleague at Dominican University. And I was interested in signing up because I've taught this course. And just like you said, it's so much work when you teach it for the first time. So yeah. I'm just curious, what would you do differently when you teach it next time? That's one. And do you think it would lend itself well to an undergrad course? Because there's so many textbooks, there's so many things. I've not used futures at all, and I'm just so super excited to explore all the ideas you've given me. But do you think it can be done at a senior undergraduate level?
Yeah. I think for the undergraduate level, definitely suitable. What I did also for the master's, I wasn't particularly heavy on the theory side when it comes to future studies. So it was also because I asked feedback on the course from a colleague who is actually from the field of future studies, also academically speaking, and from the theory perspective. And I said, like, please, you know, you can let me know if I somehow messed up a little bit with the theory side of future studies. But I really wanted to use the power of applying it to a certain context. So I worked more heavily with particular exercises and how I envisioned them to work out in my field, instead of overcomplicating that and thinking about, oh, is that actually the theoretically appropriate, you know, like application form of how future studies academics were envisioning it to be in the first place. So there might be, so if you're from that context, there might be people who are saying, maybe that's not the 100% correct way to do it. Or to apply it, but then for the students and for me, it worked really well. And so I believe if you are not like too heavy on the theory side of future studies, then it works well with an undergraduate course, definitely. And then, I mean, the only thing that might be of a, not really a concern, but that they know enough about, let's say, the different sectors they want to talk about. But I think if you provide them maybe with some reports up front or some insights, some news articles, papers, whatever, where they can read up to cover the basics, I think that would work equally well. And to your first question, what I would change, yeah, I think the Lego Serious Play, although I know it has been used fairly often in the prototyping stage, and so it makes sense to do it as an implementation tool, I believe I would do that a little bit earlier even. And students really loved the workshop, so I might even do one more workshop than I already did. So having like three workshops instead of only 2. And then to also, you know, trust my students more in terms of what they can handle in terms of new methodologies, because I was actually not telling them that I will invite an improv theater person to one class. So they didn't know that this was coming for them, because I was like a little bit afraid that when they Google about like what is improv theater, they would envision, oh, they have to do like Shakespeare play, I don't know, without, you know, even having proper texts. And then I didn't want them to overthink before coming to the session. And so I said, we have a workshop. I wouldn't tell you what it is about, but I'm sure you will love it. I actually didn't know they would love it, but I was just hoping very much that they would. And it turned out that that was exactly the case. And I was like really, really happy. And that was actually the workshop they loved, or the session they loved most. And they wrote emails after the session, said, oh, I have never experienced this in my whole studies. Like, this is so great. Yeah. And so this is cool.
Yeah, I have done improv from Second City, so I'm trained improv thing, and I've been wanting to bring it to my management class, and I'm just so excited to see that there is an application. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We did have a few questions in the chat as well. One about whether you use any AI or machine learning to model different future scenarios. And then as well, if you could, another one was about the logistics of a hybrid and whether what the benefits are for that, or do you think the whole experience would be stronger if it were completely face-to-face?
On the AI machine learning question, I would actually be very interested to try that, because I know there are increasing amount of tools to also come up with stories, or also with the GPT like applications, you can come up with a new story yourself, and then maybe, you know, have a conversation with an AI about certain scenarios and stuff. I think that is potentially something I would imagine for the future courses, and also when it comes to drawing pictures, for example, there are AI applications where you can just put what you want the AI to draw, and then they do it for you. I think the tool is called Midjourney, if I'm not mistaken, and or there are more than that, I believe. And that would be application fields where you can still like push the boundaries a little further, I think, and I believe students would love it. The second aspect would be on the logistics of hybrid, online, you know, on-site things. I really liked the hybrid format because it also gave me the opportunity to justify more the usage of tools like Miro and so on, because I didn't have the all of the students at once in the classroom. But I believe for some sessions, especially the workshops, on site is way better, way better. You can do a Lego session online, as I've done. You can also do even the improv online, but then I think it's so much nicer when the students are together in the room. And I think the energy is also way higher for these more interactive sessions when they are all on site in the classroom. So besides that, I think it's definitely worth trying it fully online even, but the workshops, I think I would definitely prefer on site, not hybrid and not online. Yeah.
Karsten, I know that was your question about AI, if you wanted to jump in on it at all.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So probably there might be maybe the one or the other tool or application that we can talk about. And I was a little bit I would not say concerned, but thinking about, let's say, how different future scenarios of different sectors or different crises, which are highly interconnected, are interlinked, and how you use, if you say, well, how is sustainability, I don't know, go with inflation, with food crisis, with energy crisis, with, I don't know, energy transition and other things. So probably maybe it might be a good idea to use AI or machine learning tools to have a better understanding of your trajectory in the future, because there are many things. And if you just look on one thing, it's not just I just predict the future here and I make some bits and turns, and the other things are stable. So there is a high degree of interconnection, but that's I think quite difficult to I don't know, to simulate or to manipulate anyhow.
Yeah, thanks for making this remark, Karsten. I believe that also when you want to professionalize this, you know, like future scenarios and so on, like the foresight and forecasting was probably not as strong as in other applications when they do a course on futures. So for me, it was more like sparking this imagination and not like thinking more in the predictions or, you know, making more the forecasts in general. But I think that could be a very nice extension, by the way. Also, if you apply it more to, let's say, strategic management, for example. And
or maybe, let's say, just having a look at the current WEF global risk report, so you can have, I don't know, more insights on different scenarios and what the implications might be, to have at least a better starting point to know how things could turn out.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Absolutely. I think, Fernanda, you have been raising your hand for quite a bit.
Yes, Marina, I would like to know what the students achieved with the program. Like, if they could get to disruptive futures or more of the same. I understand that the objective, as you were saying before, was not to create the perfect scenario and so on, but
yeah,
as you're trying to work on their imagination skill, let's see.
Yeah.
So
a couple of students after the course were saying, oh, actually, I want to think more about my own sustainability related behavior now that I see like how much, you know, impact or a difference it makes to envision a different future, and that I actually am the protagonist that can have an impact, like no matter how big or small that might be as an individual. But they were at least thinking about this. And one of the groups that were actually doing the video, they were also working together with a social startup that was more the social interpretation of Airbnb, so to speak. And they were also recording this startup person for the video that they did in the end. And so I believe they engaged a lot also in potential, you know, impacts they could really see materialize in the future. And I found this quite interesting. But yeah, I do wonder how it can even make this impact stronger than it was. For me, the first idea was to really spark their imagination, that they think more broadly and more widely, which sometimes in management education we don't do too much. But I think we can still, you know, push it a little bit further in terms of the real impact we can make. So thanks for this comment. Carsten, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe again another question, as we have a quite international audience today, and probably how about your students? So probably you will just enrich the outcome if you have got people from different countries, different cultures. I'm pretty sure, or are these old or let's say white colors Europeans that are on your course?
Like for me, in this course, that was mainly German students. Unfortunately, we are quite an international business school. But then I tried also components of this course that I did now with a group of international students, all together probably 27 different countries. And it worked well, but you have to be, I think, more careful in terms of, you know, the setup and which exercises, you know, resonate more with some cultures versus others. And there, I definitely do have some more blank spots, because I do believe that also as educators, we're not always like so much trained to focus on these like nuances of our student cohorts. But that is something I would really like to work on, to understand more where is some application potential to really use that as is now, or where I need to adapt certain exercises to make it work in a given context. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that group was mostly German. I think 80% German. Yes. Yeah, Elizabeth, I see you have your, sorry, no, it wasn't Elizabeth.
I know. Elizabeth is driving, which is why I have her connection. This is Anjali. But last fall, we did something called COIL, which is Collaborative International Learning. I didn't know if this was even a term till I was approached, but it was fascinating because we had students from University of Guelph in Canada, my university, Dominican in Chicago, one university in Indonesia, and one university in Navarra. And we had like 80 students, and we've collected pre and post data just to see how that experience was. Again, they were to collaborate. They wrote stories for Aim to Flourish website. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. That's from the Case Western Reserve University. And we thought we are going to see some huge things about conflict related to culture. And what was fascinating was that they only talked about the challenges related to time differences. Otherwise, everything was fine. And I don't know if they are trying to self-correct themselves and not say anything, because we noticed that there were some communication challenges and all that. So I don't know if this could be something to think about, but I think doing cross-cultural has its advantages. But like you said, we have to be careful because we are not trained to handle things that might come up.
Yeah. Yeah, but thanks for bringing this up actually with the intercultural issues, because I recently have attended a training on decolonial sustainability and how we do, you know, push a concept that also has like now a very strong agenda in Europe and North America. And we push it out to other countries, and we tend to sometimes, I'm not saying that it's applying for all of the people on this call, obviously, but that we tend to forget that we need to also be more inclusive about asking about viewpoints and interpretations of the people in our very classes that we teach, and not say, oh, this is like how it should be, and this is now how I teach this to you, and be more respectful about country interpretations and also the local knowledge that is already there. So the fact that we now have the Sustainable Development Goals doesn't mean we have the Holy Grail in our hands that we now need to, you know, infuse everywhere, and this is the perfect goal and nothing needs to change about this approach. And I think being more careful and being more reflective on this is very, very important. And I also raised this in a class with my students, and I said, look, I know I'm from a global north country, so I'm from Germany. I know that we did obviously a lot of awful things that I need to be, or I am very ashamed of, like carrying this cultural heritage with me. At the same time, I believe it's very important to reveal that also to people in class, to your students, where you're coming from, what is the baggage kind of that you carry, and to really engage in an open dialogue with the students, saying, no, I know that there are a lot of things still going wrong, even if we now think with the sustainability dialogue, we're on the right side of history, so to speak. But still, it doesn't mean that, we have the legitimacy to now say, oh, this is how we should all do it. And I truly believe engaging in this open dialogue earned me a lot of credibility from the student side. And I believed also a lot more students were participating in the discourse. I had a number of Indian students in my class, and they were, after the course, coming to me and saying that you were the first educator that was bringing this up in our sustainability discourses. And I think that shouldn't be the case. And I think we should work harder on this, definitely. Yeah, but thanks so much to all of you too, and for your questions and for your passion that you brought to this session. So thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Abby. See you.
See you.